Imagine a world where the global economy could regulate itself without a president signing emergency legislation, without central bankers gathering around polished conference tables, and without anyone deciding what should happen next. No emergency meetings, no political negotiations, no rescue packages. Just a system quietly observing reality and adjusting itself with mathematical precision. At first glance, this sounds less like economics and more like science fiction. Yet this is exactly what Bitcoin has been doing every single day since January 2009. Most people believe Bitcoin's greatest invention is digital money. Others think it is blockchain technology. Some point to decentralization or the famous limit of 21 million coins. Those innovations are extraordinary, but they are not the deepest breakthrough. The most overlooked invention inside Bitcoin is something almost invisible to ordinary users: the difficulty adjustment. It has no flashy interface. It produces no headlines. Investors rarely celebrate it during bull markets. Journalists almost never mention it during crashes. Yet without it, Bitcoin would have collapsed years ago. More importantly, without it, Bitcoin would not represent a fundamentally new way of organizing economic competition. To understand why, we must first understand what Bitcoin is really trying to accomplish. Many people think miners exist to create new Bitcoins. That is only partially true. The real purpose of mining is to secure time itself. Every 10 minutes, on average, the Bitcoin network adds another block to its history. Each block permanently records transactions, extending an immutable chain stretching back to the very first block mined by Satoshi Nakamoto. Those 10-minute intervals are not random. They are the rhythm that keeps the entire system alive. If blocks arrived every 30 seconds, new blocks would spread too slowly across the global network, creating confusion and increasing the likelihood of competing versions of history. If blocks arrived every hour, Bitcoin would become painfully slow, frustrating users and weakening its practicality as a global monetary network. Somewhere between those extremes lies a balance. Satoshi chose approximately 10 minutes. The remarkable question is not why 10 minutes were chosen. The remarkable question is how Bitcoin continues producing blocks every 10 minutes, despite living in a world that never stops changing. When Bitcoin first launched, only a handful of enthusiasts were mining with ordinary CPUs. Then came GPUs, then FPGAs, then specialized ASIC machines were thousands of times more powerful. Today, enormous industrial facilities filled with hundreds of thousands of mining machines consume energy comparable to small cities. The computing power protecting Bitcoin has increased by orders of magnitude beyond anything imaginable in 2009. At the same time, miners constantly enter and leave the network. Electricity prices fluctuate. Governments introduce new regulations. Hardware becomes obsolete. Entire countries ban mining before others welcome it. Bitcoin exists in a world of continuous economic turbulence. Yet despite all this chaos, blocks continue arriving at roughly the same pace. How? The answer reveals one of the most elegant engineering solutions ever created. Bitcoin does not care how many miners participate. It does not care whether there are 1,000 machines or 10 million. It does not measure electricity costs. It does not evaluate corporate profits. It does not ask anyone for permission. The network focuses on only one thing: time. Every 2,016 blocks, approximately every 2 weeks, Bitcoin compares how long those blocks actually took to produce. If miners solve them faster than expected, the network concludes that total computing power has increased, so it makes the next puzzle harder. If miners took longer than expected, Bitcoin concludes that computing power has declined, so it makes the puzzle easier. No meeting is held. No committee debates the decision. No influential investor casts a vote. No politician signs an order. The adjustment happens automatically because the rules were written into the protocol from the beginning. The network simply measures reality and responds. That single idea sounds almost trivial. In truth, it changes everything. Imagine organizing a marathon where the finish line moves depending on how many runners appear. If thousands of elite athletes suddenly join, the course becomes longer to preserve the intended challenge. If only a few exhausted runners remain, the course shortens enough to keep the race meaningful. Nobody is punished. Nobody is rewarded unfairly. The objective remains constant even as the participants change. Bitcoin behaves similarly. The goal is never to make mining easy or difficult. The goal is to maintain a stable rhythm despite changing conditions. This distinction matters more than most people realize. Traditional systems often attempt to control people. Bitcoin controls incentives instead. It never tells miners how many machines to buy. It never instructs companies where to build data centers. It never orders anyone to shut down or expand operations. It simply changes the environment in which everyone competes. If new mining equipment floods the network because Bitcoin's price rises dramatically, blocks begin arriving faster. The protocol notices. Difficulty increases. Suddenly, every miner must perform more work to earn exactly the same reward. Profit margins shrink. Less efficient operators begin struggling. Some eventually leave. As they exit, competition decreases. The system naturally approaches equilibrium once again. Notice what just happened. No authority decided that mining had become too profitable. No regulator imposed limits. No government allocated production quotas. Competition itself created the adjustment. This is an economic feedback loop operating with mathematical discipline instead of political judgment. The implications extend far beyond Bitcoin mining. Difficulty adjustment transforms the network into a living market where incentives constantly adapt to reality. Higher profits attract more capital. More capital increases competition. Greater competition reduces excess profits. Lower profits discourage inefficient participants. The cycle repeats indefinitely. Economists have described similar dynamics for centuries. When Adam Smith wrote about the invisible hand, he described markets coordinating countless independent decisions without centralized direction. Individuals pursuing their own interests often create outcomes that benefit the broader economy. It was a revolutionary insight. But Bitcoin pushes the concept one step further. The invisible hand in traditional markets depends on human behavior. Humans hesitate. They speculate, they panic, they lobby politicians, they form monopolies, they seek special treatment. They demand exceptions when circumstances become unfavorable. Bitcoin's difficulty adjustment possesses none of those characteristics. It has no emotions. It has no ideology. It has no favorite companies. It has no influential donors. It has no election cycle. It cannot be bribed. It cannot become impatient. It cannot wake up one morning and decide the rules should favor one group over another. Every participant, from a teenager running a single mining machine in a garage to a multinational corporation operating thousands of ASICs, faces the same mathematical reality. The protocol does not know who they are. It only knows the total computational power protecting the network. This radical neutrality creates something incredibly rare in economic history: a competitive arena governed entirely by transparent rules. In many industries, success eventually attracts political influence. Large firms negotiate favorable regulations. Powerful institutions receive bailouts. Market discipline weakens because certain players become too important to fail. Bitcoin recognizes no such status. A miner losing money cannot ask the protocol for relief. A corporation investing billions cannot negotiate easier conditions. A famous entrepreneur receives exactly the same probability of finding a block as anyone else with identical computational power. The rules remain indifferent. That indifference is not a flaw. It is the foundation of trust. Participants do not need to trust each other because everyone trusts the protocol to behave consistently. Ironically, this makes Bitcoin feel less like a traditional financial system and more like a law of nature. Gravity does not negotiate. Thermodynamics grants no exceptions. Mathematics does not care how strongly someone believes they deserve a different outcome. Bitcoin inherits that same impartiality. The difficulty adjustment is therefore much more than a technical mechanism keeping blocks on schedule. It is an economic governor. It constantly reshapes incentives, reallocates competitive pressure, and filters capital through the relentless logic of efficiency. Every increase in difficulty tells miners that competition has intensified. Every decrease acknowledges that competition has weakened. The network continuously broadcasts a simple message to every participant on Earth: adapt, become more efficient, or step aside for someone who can. Perhaps that is the most astonishing aspect of all. The difficulty adjustment is not merely regulating machines. It is quietly regulating the behavior of billions of dollars in global capital. Every investment in mining hardware, every decision about electricity infrastructure, every calculation of operational efficiency ultimately revolves around a heartbeat that no human controls. For nearly 2 decades, that heartbeat has continued without interruption, steady, predictable, unbiased. And with every adjustment, Bitcoin demonstrates something the modern financial world rarely achieves: a system capable of adapting continuously to changing reality without sacrificing the integrity of its rules. That is why the difficulty adjustment is not just one feature among many. It is the mechanism that transforms Bitcoin from software into a self-regulating economic organism. And once we recognize that, an even larger question begins to emerge. If a monetary network can evolve without central direction, what does that imply about the future of capitalism itself? Dela van tiptail, duk noimak chuk tu van one. If Bitcoin's difficulty adjustment is capable of organizing global competition without a central authority, then a much larger question naturally follows. What does that tell us about capitalism itself? For generations, economists have debated what makes an economy healthy. Some argue that economic growth is the answer. Others point to rising productivity. Some believe innovation is everything. Others focus on employment, inflation, or consumer confidence. These measurements certainly matter, but perhaps they all describe symptoms rather than the underlying cause. A truly healthy economic system is not one that never experiences shocks. It is one that can absorb shocks, adapt to changing conditions, and continue functioning without losing its identity. That ability to adapt may be the single most important characteristic of every successful system in nature. The human body is not healthy because its temperature never changes. It is healthy because it constantly regulates its temperature. Your heart does not beat at exactly the same speed every second. It accelerates when you run. It slows while you sleep. Your lungs continuously adjust to changing oxygen demands. Your immune system constantly reacts to new threats. Life survives because it adapts. Economies are no different. Markets rise, markets fall. Technologies emerge, entire industries disappear. Consumer preferences evolve, resources become scarce, new discoveries reshape everything. The question is never whether change will happen. The question is how a system responds when it does. Traditional financial systems usually respond through institutions. When inflation rises, central banks schedule meetings. Committees analyze reports. Economists debate forecasts. Interest rates are adjusted. Governments negotiate stimulus packages. Politicians defend competing visions. Every response depends upon people interpreting events before making decisions. Sometimes those decisions are wise, sometimes they are disastrously wrong. History offers countless examples of both. Bitcoin approaches the same problem from an entirely different direction. It does not predict, it does not speculate, it does not attempt to anticipate the future. Instead, it observes objective reality. Then it adjusts. Nothing more. Nothing less. The protocol never asks why hash rate increased. It simply recognizes that it did. It never questions whether miners deserve higher profits. It merely calculates what is necessary to restore equilibrium. This distinction may seem subtle. It is actually revolutionary. Planning assumes someone knows enough to guide the future. Adaptation assumes no one does. Bitcoin belongs entirely to the second philosophy. Rather than relying on intelligence concentrated in one institution, it distributes decision-making across millions of independent participants while allowing mathematics to coordinate the outcome. That is an extraordinary inversion of how modern economies are normally organized. In many ways, Bitcoin resembles less a financial institution than a living organism. Consider what happens every 10 minutes. Miners expend energy. Blocks are produced. Transactions are confirmed. Capital flows. Competition evolves. Then every 2 weeks, the network quietly checks its own vital signs. If the heartbeat has accelerated, it increases resistance. If the heartbeat has slowed, it reduces resistance. The rhythm returns, again and again, year after year. The hash rate becomes its circulating energy. The miners become its cells. The blockchain becomes its memory, and the difficulty adjustment becomes its heartbeat. Without a heartbeat, no organism survives. Without difficulty adjustment, Bitcoin would lose the rhythm that keeps every other component functioning together. This is far more than an engineering achievement. It is a demonstration of something economists call homeostasis. Homeostasis is the remarkable ability of living systems to maintain internal stability while the external world constantly changes. The weather changes, food availability changes, predators appear, diseases spread, yet living organisms continue functioning because they continuously regulate themselves. Bitcoin exhibits an economic version of that same principle. Markets become enthusiastic, mining expands, difficulty rises, markets become fearful, mining contracts, difficulty falls. The protocol never resists change. Instead, it transforms change into stability. This may explain why Bitcoin has survived events that many believed would destroy it. The collapse of major exchanges, global mining bans, bear markets lasting years, energy crises, regulatory uncertainty. Each event temporarily disrupted the network. None permanently damaged it. Why? Because Bitcoin never required the world to remain stable. It only required itself to remain adaptive. That distinction is profound. Many systems appear strong during periods of stability. Few remain strong during prolonged uncertainty. Bitcoin was designed for uncertainty. Difficulty adjustment is one of the primary reasons why. This brings us back to capitalism. At its core, capitalism is often described as a system of competition. Businesses compete, ideas compete, products compete, capital competes. The most efficient organizations survive while less efficient ones eventually disappear. In theory, this constant competition drives innovation and productivity. Reality, however, often looks different. Governments rescue failing corporations. Political influence reshapes regulations. Monopolies emerge. Special privileges distort competition. Economic outcomes become increasingly dependent upon access to power rather than operational excellence. Bitcoin removes nearly all of those possibilities. A mining company cannot lobby the protocol. A billionaire cannot purchase preferential treatment. A government cannot instruct the algorithm to favor domestic miners. No participant receives protection from competition itself. The protocol simply measures reality and applies the same mathematical rules to everyone. That is perhaps the purest competitive environment humanity has ever constructed. Success depends on efficiency. Failure depends on inefficiency. Nothing else. Some critics describe this as cold or unforgiving. Perhaps it is. Nature is equally unforgiving. Gravity offers no exceptions. Evolution grants no permanent advantages. Every species must continuously adapt or eventually disappear. Bitcoin inherits that same evolutionary logic. Each increase in difficulty pressures miners to innovate. They search for cheaper energy. They develop more efficient hardware. They improve cooling systems. They optimize operations. Waste gradually disappears because inefficiency becomes increasingly expensive. Ironically, every wave of competition strengthens the network itself. The stronger the competition becomes, the more secure Bitcoin becomes. The greater the hash rate grows, the more expensive it becomes to attack the network. The more capital invested in mining, the greater the incentive to protect the system rather than destroy it. Competition does not weaken Bitcoin. Competition reinforces it. This is where another powerful concept emerges. Some systems are fragile. They break under stress. Some systems are merely resilient. They survive stress without changing. But a rare category of systems actually become stronger because of stress. These are known as anti-fragile systems. Bitcoin increasingly appears to belong in that category. Every mining crisis forces greater efficiency. Every technological breakthrough raises security. Every market cycle removes weaker participants while encouraging stronger ones to continue building. Stress becomes fuel for evolution rather than a cause of collapse. Very few financial systems behave this way. Most require increasing intervention as they grow larger. Bitcoin requires only faithful adherence to its original rules. That may ultimately become Satoshi Nakamoto's greatest achievement. Perhaps blockchain will not be remembered as the defining innovation. Perhaps digital scarcity will not occupy the first chapter in future history books. Instead, historians may conclude that the true breakthrough was the creation of an economy capable of regulating itself without rulers. An economy where competition is governed by transparent mathematics rather than political discretion. An economy where incentives continuously adapt without anyone issuing commands. An economy whose heartbeat has continued uninterrupted through booms, crashes, bans, technological revolutions, and global uncertainty. For nearly 2 decades, that heartbeat has never stopped. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson Bitcoin offers the modern world. Capitalism does not fail because competition exists. It fails when competition is replaced by privilege. Bitcoin's difficulty adjustment reminds us what genuine competition looks like. The rules remain constant. The incentives remain transparent. Reality remains the only judge. Whether Bitcoin ultimately becomes the world's dominant monetary network is a question, though. History has not yet answered. But one truth is already difficult to ignore. Every 14 days, without applause, without headlines, and without permission from anyone, the Bitcoin network quietly adjusts itself and continues moving forward. Like every healthy heart, it does not ask for attention. It simply keeps beating. And as long as that heartbeat continues, Bitcoin remains far more than digital money. It remains one of humanity's most compelling experiments in whether an economic system can sustain itself through rules instead of rulers, adaptation instead of prediction, and mathematics instead of power.